So just want to start off by saying thank you for someone in the industry knowing how to say my name without me briefing him. We were actually taking bets about how far off he would be, and he was actually dead on. So I'm happy about that. And then a little sad that I have to follow the 3M guys because they had props, including books. I don't have any of those. So it's just going to be me today. And give you a little bit of a brief background so that at least you understand the title of my presentation, if not at least parts of the content. I am the Senior Vice President for Global Sales and Marketing at Digital, and certainly have a lot to do with the cloud community because of that. But most recently, I come from Salesforce.com, and before that, I did a good deal of work running Microsoft's global government business, and specifically involved with federal BPOS and the federal cloud work that we took throughout the world. So I've been in the cloud industry for quite some time, and so the experience, hopefully that experience has given me some knowledge that I can impart, maybe some knowledge that I can impart, maybe not. I also like to clear up that I've had my slides edited by both my PR agency as well as the fine folks at 451. So I do have promises out to all of them that I won't violate any of the rules. The first one was that I wouldn't swear, so I fucking won't do that. And the second one is that I wouldn't mention competitors, so at least I'll be quiet about that one. But hopefully this will be a good way to get people re-energized for the rest of the day and move on from there. I've been preaching for a long time to CIOs. I'm a former CIO too. Before I was at Microsoft, I was Chief Information Officer for the state of Wisconsin, the Secretary of Technology. But I've been preaching to other Chief Information Officers and IT folks that the world has changed. Now, I started that conversation a long time, what is now a long time ago, between 7 and 10 years ago, talking with folks that IT and technology really is a strategic driver for business, for government, for folks that are involved with it, and it shouldn't be managed as a cost center. It shouldn't, and I'm looking around to make sure that my CFO is not yet in the office, it shouldn't report to the CFO. IT should be something that's strategically important for folks. When I first started saying that, I'm not sure that the infrastructure was all in place to make that theory a reality. But over the past 10 years, that reality has really changed. Data centers now, I often talk about them now as not being data stores, but rather the value of the information that's contained inside those data centers is the ability to exchange that information. In data centers, if you look around the tables and you see all of the devices, most people in our community, especially in the digital realty community, have more than one device on them at any particular time. That proliferation of devices, the Internet of Things, Cisco's having an event right now talking about the Internet of Everything, is really making data centers underpin this data economy. And the cloud itself, people often reference it as something external to the data center enterprise. The cloud itself lives, and of course from where I come from, lives in some of our data centers, lives in some of our competitors' data centers. It lands on big iron, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But as that volume of data sort of begins to surge, really that value of data becomes instrumental. And in particular, in some parts of the economy, it's actually what the companies are about. So we announced a mid-market strategy this past year, and when we did some digging into what mid-market customers were looking for, they not only didn't treat IT or technology as a back office part of their operation or a cost to be managed, but it was in fact the business process itself. Technology has become the solution. We've seen this in the past in some pretty impressive places, right? When the press became something that was invented in Gutenberg, and I'm partially German, so I'm a fan of this particular picture, it certainly revolutionized the way learning happened, the way that knowledge was transferred, the way that people were educated. It changed an entire set of societies all in one fell swoop. But the ecosystem was a little easier at the time, maybe not easy for the guy that's turning that wrench, but it was a little bit easier. There weren't as many complexities, right? You had to have the paper that was provided, you have to have the ink that was provided, and you had to have the mechanicals. But it wasn't like the environment that I was promising to chief executives when I was a CEO about how open standards had to exist, how we had to agree about the exchange format, how there had to be network density for us to be successful. All of the things that had to exist 10 years ago simply weren't there. The promise was there. Everyone understood it theoretically. The smart folks in the audience certainly understood that we would get there, but we weren't quite there yet. That's all changed now. And the cloud is really sort of the key to that. Right? The cloud is in essence, the equivalent of the press at the time. The press wasn't the only important piece, but it certainly was the one that sort of tipped folks towards a new reality. And we've really started to see this. In 451's research, only 29% compound annual growth rate over the next 5 years is a significant growth rate. I can tell you from our experience, I managed the global sales force at Digital. 60% of just last quarter, 60% of our results came from infrastructure providers that were providing cloud services. And if you add social networks to that, it becomes an even larger number. So I don't generally include social networks in our cloud number. So cloud certainly puts us at a tipping point. And when we look at the mid-market in particular, we see folks continuing to look to us, global companies, mid-market and larger, looking to the industry to stand up and stand behind the new strategic imperative that is technology. They're looking at us either fully outsourced, modular builds, or co-location and with a lease. They're looking for us to solve the problem. And the drivers, again, the number one driver is business growth. I think this is actually an underreported number. It's our own research, so I shouldn't say it's underreported, but I think the number's off by an order of magnitude. The number one thing that CEOs tell to me and to my staff is that the most unpredictable piece that they need to have the data center handle is business growth. So folks often point to IT and say, IT is not doing a good job of capacity planning, but in fact, the business growth patterns are so unpredictable, it's almost impossible to do that. So it's no longer technology that says, no longer just the HR system or just the email system. Now it's the business itself. We've seen this in some pretty remarkable places, and I don't use customer names while we're up here, but we did just land a very large deal in Austin, Texas, and we just finished the commissioning for that particular company. And you know, you expect, after you've been in the data center business for long enough, you expect to see racks, you expect to see cracks, you expect to see the normal, the PDUs, the stuff that we see in every data center. And when you walk into this one, you see stuff that I've never even seen on a raised floor before in my life, or in my career. So people are doing incredibly different things, and it's to accomplish this business growth. Big data, application proliferation, all point to business dominating the data center drivers that are out there. So tech isn't an afterthought anymore. Technology is now the strategy. So it's finally come to fruition, which is great. So for me, I would speak about this for my old staff and for folks I was trying to get energized about changing the way things work. It was a revolution. It was a revolution that I saw a while ago and a number of folks saw a while ago that was possible. But there's a story that sort of sticks with me. I'm a lawyer by trade. I went to law school at the University of Wisconsin Law School, and I went there in particular because of one professor, Professor Jim Jones, not the Jim Jones with the Kool-Aid, totally different guy. But Professor Jim Jones is actually the architect of the Civil Rights Act in the United States. And he also worked on some of the early labor laws and labor regulations in the country. So for someone who was a young buck trying to make a difference in the world, he was sort of the ground zero for folks who wanted to change things from that perspective. And so I went there because of him, and I made him my advisor, one of those kids that knocked on his door and wouldn't go away until he paid attention to me. And I sat down and I talked with him, and I said, you know, I can't imagine, I see all these things that need to change in the world, these things that need to change in technology, these things that need to change in the environment, and I get frustrated that they haven't happened already, and I get frustrated that it takes so long to happen. I can't imagine what it was like before the civil rights movement when you were seeing what needed to happen. It was so clear at that time what needed to happen, and you knew in your heart that it would take 10, 15, 20, 30 years to make that happen. How do you do that kind of thing? And he had a way about him. He said, you got to do it one step at a time. You cannot simply put out the future and expect the future to exist. You've got to walk through steps to get there. And so he took tiny steps to make that movement move forward, and he was relatively successful. So I take that with me, and part of that is understanding from a hierarchical perspective, if cloud is the new future, what does that hierarchy look like? What do we need to start with? What do we need to move to? What do we need to be providing as data center providers? Providers that provide us with our services. What do you need to provide to end clients? And cloud providers, new cloud providers. Either very large cloud providers, we've got relationships with several of those, and very small cloud providers that are trying to serve a local or a regional market. This basically gives you an understanding of of a hierarchy of needs, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but a little bit more towards data centers. And I always hesitate to use Maslow as an example because self-actualization was the top part. It always seemed like an impossible thing to get to. I don't think advantage is impossible to get to, but it certainly could be said that it does. So how do you move up the hierarchy? If you're a data center provider, if you're a provider of resources to data centers, if you're an enterprise, what questions do you need to ask to make sure that these things are done correctly? If you're a mid-market organization, what do you need to make sure happens so that you're going to be satisfied and so that you can grow? On the basic side, and this is often, in fact, my notes on the slide say to go through this slide quickly because it's the basic slide, right? Sustenance. Every provider should be providing space, power, cooling, connectivity, and tools. And I don't think there's very much argument that you need to be providing those things. But I think if you're a mid-market organization or if you're a large enterprise looking for services, this becomes very easy to fall in love with, right? It seems very simple, right? I need space and power, basically, is what it boils down to for folks. And when you start to look at things, especially when you start to look at things during the day, when things are operating nicely, when things are going according to plan, things look somewhat equal, and different providers don't look largely differentiated. This is a picture of one of our favorite cities in the world, New York. This is the lower part of the island. This is before Sandy, and this is after. So when you think about those basic needs that you have in a data center, it's alluring to think about them only in terms of when things are going well. It's imperative for you, if you're a buyer of data center services, to think about what the heck happens when Sandy hits. What happens when the lights go out? What happens when the power goes out? What happens when I can't get my people back to sleep because they've been working for 24 hours to be able to operate the data centers that went dark that day? Ours did not, but it was because we ask ourselves that question. And some of the folks in the industry, I know there's folks in the industry as well that ask themselves those very same questions. They're tough questions. Sometimes they require capital. We talked a little bit earlier, Chris talked a little bit earlier today about size not necessarily mattering. As a short guy, that always rubs me the wrong way, especially from a tall 6-foot guy from Texas. But it does matter in some cases. It mattered when Sandy hit. It'll matter when the next one hits. Because you want to make sure that folks are investing in the maintenance of their equipment so that it doesn't go down when something unexpected does come up. And when something unexpected does come up, you want to make sure that you have the resources to react to it when it does come up. And that you have the operational experience across a wide, what we call wide N, a wide sample of customers, so you know what to do when those things happen. Right? So when power went out, when fuel was lost, and folks couldn't get fuel in because they only had regional contracts and not national contracts, that's something that makes those basic needs really, really important to hammer out when times are good, not when times are bad. There's a second step. We do have an opportunity, there's a need that our customers and our clients have, our joint clients have, for safety, but more importantly, that we have an opportunity to create for them confidence. And I'll talk in just a little bit about why that confidence is important. Some of these things may seem like they should be in the basic slide, right? Physical security seems kind of important. But again, it's one of those capital outlays that if you don't have easy access to low-cost capital, if your weighted average cost of capital is too high, you may feel the need to sort of go down on your K rating in the fencing needs that you have in terms of physical security. But if you don't have that restraint, you can build greater confidence in physical security. Same thing for business continuity. Compliance becomes incredibly important. When I worked at the state, I worked for an organization that compliance was really important for. We've got a number of customers. We serve the financial services industry around the world. Compliance is very, very important for them. Some people refer to it as a checkbox, but it's so much more than that for us. For us to have compliance at the top of our list gives our customers the confidence to do what they need to do to safely grow their business. It's something that folks don't always take into account when they think about this need for safety, but that confidence really leads to them being able to take greater business risk because they understand that we've got their back as an industry. None of my slides are about digital, they're about really the whole industry. Important for folks to ask about a track record. I do give Uptime. This was in the slide before they yelled at me about taking the other research stuff out. But a track record of incredible uptime, right? And that uptime, it needs to be more than the sort of 5 nines that people banty about. 5 nines of what? And across what time frame? We've got it across 7 years. Across what end? How large is that sample? How fast has it been growing? Are you able to sustain that stuff? You need to ask those critical questions. And financial stability, I talked a little bit about already, that financial stability actually gives confidence to customers. So there's a number of competitors in the audience that have great financial stability. Those are the types of organizations that create the confidence that customers have the ability to then take advantage of, right? So the umbrellas that we provide as an industry to our greatest resource, which is our clients and our customers, are just like this. Umbrellas can't stop the rain. We can't stop the problems from happening, but they do make us stand in the rain, and confidence may not bring success, but it gives power to face any challenge. That's the challenge that we have in front of us. It's not about speeds and feeds. It is a little bit about that in the detailed operational work that we do day to day, but it's building confidence so that they can face any challenge that comes up in the future. And that confidence comes not from us always being right or them always being right, but not fearing to be wrong. If growth is the number one driver that mid-market as well as large enterprise customers care about, they have to feel that they're safe to take risks within their data center environment. Now, they can do a ton of different stuff, and I'm talking to some folks who are doing some incredibly crazy things with their IT infrastructure, incredible things. And it's because the industry now is giving them some confidence, right? That they don't have to fear being wrong about making a mistake, that they can actually grow as fast as they possibly can. The next level up on the chart is a need for choice. And I've had a lot of experience in this particular part of the industry. It's a big part of the open source movement and spoke a lot about it. I've seen when choice is expanded for folks, customers benefit. And ultimately, the companies that are providing that choice benefit as well, but customers benefit first. And so it's important for an industry to embrace open standards. It's important for an industry to embrace choice, a wide degree of choice, both in terms of what's put in front of them as well as what's available to them. So we've understood this in the data center community for a long time. We've been carrier neutral pretty much from the beginning of multi-tenant data centers. We understood that customers wanted to have a choice of their providers. Somehow we lost a little bit of that when cloud became something important, right? So we started sort of making some proprietary arrangements with some cloud systems, some direct connects to cloud providers that were within a particular data center. But it's important to understand that same choice dynamic applies to cloud services as well as network services. It applies to managed services as well as cloud services, but cloud in particular is pretty important. When you land in a data center, you should demand that that provider give you access to all of the public cloud and private cloud assets that they possibly can at the most efficient and secure way possible. As I said, we've done it in connectivity options. A couple of places we haven't done it as individual industry players that I think people need to focus on is making sure that strategic locations and proximity is understood from the customer point of view, not just from the provider point of view. And this is a little bit of us falling on our sword at Digital and other providers like us that have viewed our job to be real estate stewards and not customer service providers. As real estate stewards, there's an argument to be made to only locate in highly dense populations, not to locate anywhere else. As folks who want to serve customers, you've got to look at different opportunities that may not be the best real estate deal, but that actually solve our customers' concerns. And so we need to be open to strategic locations. We need to be open to different types of proximity, not just being close to the New York Stock Exchange, and we are, as well as a number of other folks, but being close to other opportunities. I'll talk a little bit about one of those strategic opportunities as we move forward. And then multiple deployment options. I was glad to see Chris stand up here earlier and talk about the way that Compass delivers data centers and data center services to customers. And I'm glad to see when I'm on stage next to the folks at CoreSite and DuPont Fabros and the guys at I/O, I embrace all of that because our joint customers need multiple options. We also need to look internally to see if we can provide some of those multiple options. Again, we don't have to simply provide, in our case, a TKF, a two-end solution. on one type of component, N+1 in another type of component. Some customers may want something different. And if you listen closely to your customers, you can understand that. We were presented with I'll call it an opportunity. It's an opportunity we closed on, so it was a good opportunity in the great state of Texas. And the sales rep that came up to me and talked to me about it was sheepish about it when he first came up to me. He said, look, and they're looking for this particular type of rate. And he told me the number, and I said, I don't know. I'm on investment committee. I don't know that I can sell that. He said, well, tell me a little bit more about the deal. I asked him, what is the customer looking to do? And we deconstructed what the customer was looking to do, and then we reconstructed the great stuff that we do inside digital into a package that made that a profitable deal for us, and it addressed their needs, and it came in exactly at the price point that they wanted. So when you're open to change, and I'm glad that folks like Chris and other folks push us as an industry leader to change, when we're open to that, we serve customers better and customers succeed, and then we succeed as well. So in terms of, I always like to have openness, right? And I don't want to suggest that just Android is open and Apple is proprietary. Well, maybe I do. I have an opinion about it. And I have opinion about who's going to win, but I do, again, and this is just one chart, and it has continued down this route, right? So when you create openness, when you create choice, when you listen to your customers, the market responds. The folks are very concerned that there's one type of way that we construct our deals or that other folks construct their deals based upon the cost that they incur by the way that they do their capital deployments. That's bullshit. There's nothing that we can't do to satisfy a customer need. And when we listen to our customers, we see the results eventually. We just have to be patient as an industry. The last two pieces are the places where we really can start to differentiate what we do. When you sit in front of your CEO and you talk about data centers and he or she glosses over because you're talking about technology, these are the places that if we focus on the next two steps, we can really change that conversation forever, right? The need for vision and a focus on growth becomes incredibly important. Push your providers, and if the providers aren't getting it to you, on scalability, select another provider or select multiple providers, right? You need to be able to scale out. You need to be able to expand, and as I talked about before, you need to be able to expand in places that might not look normal to a real estate company. Push anyone who says they're a real estate company to think about their business in a different way, because that's the kind of vision that our customers are asking us for, and not just small businesses, right? Medium-sized businesses, incredibly large enterprises. Had a conversation with an incredibly large enterprise out in the hall that was talking about single deployments of what I would call micro data centers. That's something that maybe a year ago, Digital Realty wouldn't even consider doing. But because we understand that unlocks their ability to grow, their ability to hit top line and bottom line revenue expectations, that's something that we have to figure out how to do it. Financial predictability, can you provide a predictable stream of expenses that match revenues at the same time? Can you make that stuff happen at the right time? But the most important piece in need for vision and growth is this technology evolution and disruption. I answer this question all the time. I'm in front of investors and analysts on a regular basis, and depending upon what just happened, if Google cut their price on GCE, or if Amazon matched that price cut, or if virtualization went to a new level, or HP announced Moonshot, they all think that our business is falling apart. And it's a valid question. I don't know if it's a valid question. It's a good question to ask, right? So what happens in terms of technology, evolution, and disruption? The one thing I've always told folks is that it's gonna change. Whatever technology you're deploying now, it's going to change, and it's changing more rapidly than ever before. So what is it that providers can do? What is it that you should demand if you're a mid-market company or a large enterprise? What should you demand from your providers moving forward to make sure that they have that growth perspective moving forward? I just left a conversation with a global multinational financial services firm, whose name I will leave out of this. Great customer, expanding customer with an incredible appetite for technological change. Spelled out, this is not their slide, so don't go trying to figure out who it is by this slide. I believe this is a Cisco slide. But we started talking about software-defined networks, and then we started talking about software-defined infrastructure, and then we started taking it to the next level. So what happens if SDI, not the Star Wars SDI, software-defined infrastructure really exists? What's the end state that we could have there? You could literally have a box that for 5 minutes acts as a file server, a box that then turns into a router, a box that then turns into a mail server, a box that then turns into storage, because the software defines the infrastructure that it needs at any particular time. So when he painted this vision, it's a great CIO, global CIO, painted this vision. Myself and Jim Smith, our CTO, I think looked at each other and went, I don't know how to respond to that particular set of events. Until you think about it for a while, right? It always lands in a box. It always comes back to iron of some sort. It always has to have a home. This was the response when I/O came out and it made a great big splash about what they were doing, right? That stuff has to land somewhere, has to live somewhere. It has to have a facility that's managed well. It has to be tuned to what those particular needs are. So that conversation then turned into a great conversation about, well, if that existed, what kind of power requirements would be there? What kind of cooling requirements would we have? I'm glad that 3M's here because I need to talk to them about some advanced cooling components that they might be able to add to that particular conversation, because it throws off an awful lot of heat when you do that kind of switching on the fly. And so we started having a great conversation about what the data center of the future would look like. None of us have ever seen it. None of us have ever deployed it. I'm not entirely sure this person can get his board of directors to sign off on it, but the conversation made each of us better. It made him think about his business, and it made us think about our business. What does it look like 5 to 10 years from now? I don't care what it looks like this year. I do for all of you that are deploying right now. I care deeply about that. But I care more deeply about what it looks like 5 years from now. Not only does it exist, but what does it look like? What does it feel like? What does success look like for our customers? And if this guy is successful and we're successful meeting that customer need, we're the only ones having that conversation. But as I said before, I welcome competition, so I'd welcome everyone else to have that conversation as well. The last piece is really need for data advantage. How do you turn the rest of those steps into something that truly matters for business? How do you create new opportunities? How do you create faster time to market? You know, how do you focus on performance and on user experiences? Personally, I like to just use this slide because I was a kid in the 80s. And for those of you who don't know what this is, this was one of the first what I would call good video games that my daughter would laugh at. A text-based game, had no graphics at all, but was incredible. It actually turned into then graphical stuff that sucked. It was not very good. It was Zork 2, Zork 3, and the like. We've decided to work with the gaming industry to revision what a data center could look like, what a provision of service could look like, taking from this starting point of basic gaming operations. What were the business qualifications that folks in the gaming ecosystem needed and that we could provide as a data center provider? Was there a match there? Was there something that we could do together that made some sense? And sure enough, there was. And we started getting some incredible traction about thinking about our business in a totally different way. We need to have a multitude of different offerings. We need to have low density offerings for storage. We need to have high density offerings for some pieces of the compute. We need to have micro data centers available to provide low latency switching. For those of you who are actually still gamers, and I still am a gamer, if you miss a second in a particular game, you miss a lot. Right? If there's a stutter in your gunfire, that's something that's going to cause you not to win. That becomes incredibly valuable to EA Sports. It becomes incredibly valuable to the providers of this particular service. But more important, they're blocked out right now because of the way networks work, so that they can't deploy to the one place that everyone wants to deploy to. Everyone's got 2 of them on their tables right now or in their pockets. Right? Everyone wants to go mobile. But in the United States, there's a constraint on the amount of bandwidth that can get to that particular device. And so gaming companies are really, really frustrated that they can't do that. Is there something that a data center provider with a great network of network providers and cloud service providers could do to solve that particular set of problems? And what would that do to the gaming industry? Again, do we provide business value? When I used to work at Microsoft, literally the building next to me was entertainment and devices, also known as Xbox, and a bunch of other stuff, but the other stuff didn't really matter because Xbox brought in all the revenue. And a couple of my friends over at Xbox, because I was a gamer, I would talk to them about their business, try to figure out what it was, told me the billions of dollars they spend on not game development, anti-piracy. And so if we were able to unlock the ability to deliver streaming experiences to individual handheld devices, individual phones, individual iPads, individual Galaxy-type devices. That would save each and every one of these providers billions of dollars annually. They were spending billions of dollars on anti-piracy. So the value that data centers can unlock for business is not simply because we want to do cool stuff, although this will result in some really cool stuff, some advanced stuff that we haven't done before. But it's because it provides business value that then can be monetized by the companies that are involved in it, and can provide incredible cost savings for some of these companies as well. And so that's when you get to the advanced stages of this game, that's when you can sit across the table from your CEO and say, look, this is something that's really important. Very, very quickly. I don't want to spend too much on this. I'm happy to answer questions about it. Go back. I don't know what happened. But basically, go back to the case study slide if you can. It's not a secret, and actually I think that Chris mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. We work with some very large companies. One of them we started working with when they were a very small company. And it's actually sort of the reason I like to talk about it as a case study is it's how we grew with them. And it's a very good example of when you focus on your customers' needs, you can both succeed together, right? So SoftLayer first came to us when they were starting out, and some of the people that built some of the first SoftLayer pods are actually in the office, came to us with some crazy ideas about how they could sort of put a dent in the universe and take over the world, as some folks might say. And so they worked with us to provide a finely tuned piece of machinery that was tuned to SoftLayer's specific needs. And not very far off from what we did, but it was certainly a departure from what we did on a regular basis. But because we sat and listened to them, we actually created a mutually beneficial experience where we found a way to provide a set of services, a set of technologies that were something that made them successful, and their response to us in terms of what they paid us for made us successful as well. The rate of return matched what our expectation was, and it absolutely matched their expectation. We grew with them, and we continue to grow with them today. Interesting, though, that they came from almost nothing, and it requires us to sort of defy I'm looking around now to see if my CEO is in the office, defy the laws of financial responsibility. And we've done this on a number of occasions. There's a small social networking outfit just a few miles down the road that came to us early as well, and came to us with a little bit of revenue. They hadn't really started generating a whole lot of revenue yet, and we had to make a call to make a risk, finally tune some things for them, and see if we could make them successful, and I think we did a pretty good job there. In this case, we took something capitalized by a few $1 million by a few bright individuals, really bright individuals, I'm a fan of those particular individuals, and turned it into something that then turned into a $2 billion sale to IBM. And they're not done yet, right? So that was just the start. The investments continue. And so when we pay attention to what our customers are saying, we're able to actually be successful mutually. But all of this requires an incredible amount of change, and I've spoken about change for a very long time. I care about it. I used to try to change local governments, educational systems, states, national politics, very large companies in the Pacific Northwest. I tried to change great cloud companies in San Francisco. Change is very difficult, but there are a couple of secrets that I have learned about how to do this change. And for everyone in the audience, whether you're a provider of services, whether you're starting a cloud services company, whether you own a cloud services company, whether you're mid-market enterprise or a large-scale enterprise, all of what I talked about requires a large amount of change. We just went through some changes at Digital too. And one of the things I try to tell folks right now in our history is Socrates' quote, right? Secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. You can talk forever about the problems that we've had. You can talk forever about the industry problems that we've had. You can talk forever about the bureaucracy that you happen to live in right now. Your energy, if you want to change those things, is best focused on building the new world. When you build the new world, eventually people will point back at that and say, I don't understand why we did that before. If you focus on the old, you'll never get there. But one of the other requirements, this is a requirement to be on my team at Digital, so if any of you sales folks are looking to get a job, understand this, that you don't just have to tell people the truth every once in a while, and it's not just something nice to do and that nice people are honest and nice people speak up. We call it a solemn obligation on my team. That you have an obligation because of the very important thing that we have been entrusted with by our customers, right? We have been given the trust of their IT load, which again, going back to the first couple slides, is now the direct strategy of the companies that they're involved with. It's no longer back office HR, back office IT, something to be controlled by a CFO's office or a cost to be controlled. It's the very essence of these companies. We have an obligation to speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. And so I talk to folks about bravery, right? The ability, I don't like to talk up when bosses have issues, but I've got an obligation to do that because the stuff that's running in our data center is just too important for us not to. I did say I wasn't gonna do that. So this is my house. I have a little dog like that and a big dog like that, and the little dog does fuck you all the time to the big dog, kind of owns the big dog, right? So no matter the disparity of power that you have in an organization, no matter where you are in the organization, I say whether you're the janitor or whether you're in the C-suite, you have an equal obligation to speak truth to power. You gotta understand, and I don't let my guys ever say, when guys ask me, what do we do? If any of my guys at that table say that we sell data centers, they're fired. Because we do not sell data centers. We do not lease data centers. We make our customers' dreams real. That conversation that senior leadership teams have Monday mornings, and they put these big problems in front of themselves and try to solve it. We've got the cancer, I'm not allowed to talk about individual companies. We've got companies that are trying to cure cancer. I'm a type 1 diabetic. We've got companies that are trying to cure my disease so that I don't have to look at my granddaughter someday and know that she's gonna get it because it skips a generation. We manage the financial services institutions that protect the life savings and the pensions of people who have worked their entire lives just to be able to retire for a few weeks. So I don't let my folks say that we sell data centers, because that's not what we do. And why is it important to take the kind of risk to look up at that big dog and tell them what you've got to tell them? Because it's that important. It's not speeds and feeds. You're not doing racks. You're not setting up UPSs. That's not what you're doing. You're fundamentally changing the way the world works. You're fundamentally making it possible for that CIO to stand next to her CEO and tell them that we're going to change the world through the use of technology, but that requires you to do some things that you're not comfortable with. So I've given these kind of speeches for a long time. I've convinced a lot of politicians to give these kind of speeches. I used to think it was easy to do this kind of stuff, and I've been through the, Crosby had a good conversation about the scars, battle scars, and education, right? I've got my learnings through education. It's hard. So I would preach about this kind of stuff, and I never understand why it wouldn't take hold, right? Why don't people believe me when I say this? Or why didn't the change take hold? And I was in a conversation with my then very young daughter, Emma. Eventually she's gonna get mad that I use her name in these speeches. In a conversation with my daughter, Emma, and so my table doesn't get to react to this, we were playing Barbies, because yes, I do that with my young daughter. And it was a wedding set of some sort, and Barbie was getting married, and my young daughter, and then at the time I think 4 years old, looked up to me and said, are you going to, I don't wear suits at home, I wear jeans and t-shirts and stuff. Are you gonna wear a tuxedo at my wedding? And you'll see in a little bit why this hit me in an odd way. It hit me fundamentally as a very tough question for me to answer. Of course, I answered her immediately. And I said, yes, Daddy will wear a tuxedo at your wedding and walk you down the aisle and do all that kind of stuff. But I live my life, so I'm from Wisconsin, if I haven't said that yet, go Packers. I'm a Wisconsin guy, season ticket holder. I like to talk about them a lot. Good things come from that, but also some pretty challenging things. This is what I looked like 7 years ago. I weighed 330, I stopped weighing after a little bit, but 330 plus pounds. My blood pressure was so high that the last time I went to the doctor before this set of pictures was taken, my doctor asked me if I had a living will. So when my daughter asked me if I was gonna be at her wedding in a tux, all I heard was, am I gonna be alive to be at her wedding? So we talk about the challenges of change in terms of what we do in our business, and the only thing that allowed me to lose 165 pounds 7 years ago and keep it off and redo my entire way of living was because I personalized it. It became personally important for me to do it. I wasn't gonna let my daughter down. I wasn't going to let my family down. So when we talk about the business that we do, and we sometimes, so I ride the BART home, right? Sometimes you check out, right? It's not important anymore. I can let go. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to change the world anymore. That's bullshit, man. You've got to make this something that's every day, no matter what you do, if you are a secretary or if you are a janitor, you have the ability to change the dynamics within your organization to do absolutely magical and insane things. But only if each day you wake up believing that personally and committing to it over and over again. And I always say, if a fat guy brought up in Wisconsin for nearly 40 years being that fat and that overweight can strip off 165 pounds, we can change the data center industry. So that's my presentation. I don't know how long we have for questions, and I don't see my handler, so go ahead. And we can ask questions until someone yells at me to stop. And no, my table cannot ask questions about Barbie. Nice try, Martine. Mm-hmm. Not enough. But I am called on from time to time to get people excited about stuff. Much more when Microsoft pays people to do that. I'm apparently paid to bring in revenue. If I could do that by giving speeches, I would do that. Yep.
So Matt, what do you see are some of the most prominent changes to come in the data center world?
Well, so I think that there's a number of changes to come. First of all, sort of an elimination of the terms that we use, like wholesale and retail and co-location are going to become something that just doesn't exist anymore in the future. Customers are going to start to demand more personalized services. You're going to see gaming exchanges as opposed to co-location offering. You're going to see healthcare exchange. I'm told not to call it healthcare exchanges in the United States, so healthcare clouds, things like that. You're going to see a vertical approach, I think, to the data center industry. I think that you're going to see, and Casey, you'll care about that, I think you're going to see folks care much more deeply about energy efficiency because they have to, not because it becomes a choice. Right now it's an economic choice. I think in the United States you're going to see a tipping from a value perception of being close to a network node to a value perception of do you provide the right amount and right type of data center services for customers the way they want them at the price they want to get them at. And I think that's going to be changed by the OpenIX initiatives that are out there. I think that's going to create some good competition in the world. I certainly hope, and this is going to sound odd, I certainly hope that we see more competition in the space. More competition is better for us. I think the more folks that get into this asset class, the better the reporting will be. All kinds of great benefits come from more people being involved. So I think there's the demand curve, and I'm a microeconomist, that demand curve is pushing so far that there's no doubt that change is coming. It's just a matter of figuring out if you're agile enough to adapt to it. I buy digital data centers. So the question was, what are the top 3 things you do to lose 165 pounds? The first thing is you stop eating like you're from Wisconsin. That was key. We have 3 major food groups, which is beer, cheese, and fried. It's just fried whatever, it doesn't matter. So you need to pay attention to that. Honestly, it's not, I always hesitate this because I say it's not tricky. I'm an old retired engineer at heart, and so I sat down in a program that Microsoft paid half of for me to go through, and the guy explained how my body worked, and it just clicked. And so for me, it was a couple things in particular. Lean protein, a lot of lean protein, fruits, vegetables, and a small amount of good fat. That's in essence my diet. The guys make fun of me for the way I eat. Exercise is key. I run about 5K every other day, maybe every 3 days. But I don't overdo it. It's important not to overdo it so you can sustain it. And then you have to be psychologically in tune with where you are. right? So one of my big problems was the lean protein kept me not hungry, but psychologically you'd still stand in front of the refrigerator when things were going bad at work. It hasn't happened for the last year and a half, but that's something that you have to be open to, right? That there's things that drive you that are outside of logic. If you get that, then those three things will get you there. I knew if I ended with that picture, they would be about my weight loss. And by the way, there's costs involved, so I had to buy suits like 5 different times because you look like you're getting buried by a suit. But I'm done doing that now. All right? Oh, wait.